it is reading wrap-up time across the internet. I thought this would be such a fun video to make, like just talk about all of the books that I read this year, and then I tallied them up and listen, it was a busy year, okay? I read 23 books this year, and when I say it out loud, like, yes, 23 is kind of a lot, but at the same time, so many people making these videos have read over 100 books. I don't know how you guys do it. Share your secrets in the comments if you're a speed reader. But maybe that's just who I'm seeing online. I would love to hear how many books you've read, if you don't mind like dropping it in the comments. Maybe I'm just underachieving as as a reader. Anyway, I wanted to recap all the things that I read this year and then give like a top 5. I'm gonna go in order of what I read chronologically this year, and then I'll crown the top 5 books. Though I do want to preface that all the books that I read, I really enjoyed. I think they're all good. I am usually a pretty easy to please reader, so even the books that didn't make the top 5, I would probably still recommend them. Anyway, first on the list is Gleanings. This is a collection of short stories that goes with the Scythe trilogy. In my opinion, the Scythe trilogy is one of the best crafted trilogies I've ever come across in my existence. It is so good. The premise of Scythe is that the AI has become our government/god, and the only thing it can't do is kill people. But in this universe, we have solved mortality. So it is up to scythes or sanctioned killers to thin out the population every year to make sure there is enough room and resources for everybody who is alive to thrive. So that's like the trilogy, and we follow 2 young scythes, essentially. This book is a lot of short stories, mostly of other scythes, most of whom we see in the trilogy in some capacity or another. Like some of them we only see like very briefly. When I tell you that this book haunts me, this felt like how I feel after reading Edgar Allan Poe. Like, it's the same emotion of just being like, how did you come up with this? It's so disturbing. Because a lot of the scythes, they have their own signature kill style, and so we see some of that in here. And we also get to see the basically villain origin story of the main antagonist in the Scythe trilogy. I have a whole review going through each of the short stories in here. If you would like to check it out, I will link it in the description. So I started my reading year quite strong with this one. Next up was this one. Look at the thickness. Maybe this is why I only got through 23 books this year, is because a lot of the books I read are they're so thick. This is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series, because I understand that we are getting a 4th book. I really like all of Sarah J. Maas's books. The characters just really hit correctly for me. This is probably my least favorite series of the bunch, and I think it's because it's like modern day. They have cell phones and modern fashion and things like that, which in a fantasy world isn't my favorite thing to read. And so while I definitely enjoyed this, if you're going into Sarah's books for the first time, I always recommend Throne of Glass, unless you don't have the patience for a slow burn, in which case I would kind of push more towards ACOTAR. I'm sure you've heard of it. Next up was a reread of Lore Olympus. This is a graphic novel. I absolutely love the art style. It's very much like watercolor-ish, but I mean, I'm pretty sure this is digitally drawn, but it looks like true watercolors and stuff. It is a Hades and Persephone retelling that, ironically to what I just said about Crescent City, takes place in a more modern world. But I am generally a sucker for any Hades and Persephone retelling, and this one is just fantastically done, and it's so beautiful. I know there's 2 more volumes after this one. I read up to like, I think into what is technically volume 3 on Webtoon, and I think it's still up there, but you do have to scroll for days and days. These books are so beautiful. I do want to get the rest of them. I have so much respect for the author of this. Like, when she went through and was illustrating these, she originally did it, and then she went back through and redid a lot of the illustrations because her skills had gotten better. So I'm pretty sure this is the most recent version of her illustrations, and I know that that was not an easy thing to take on. Next up, I do not have a physical copy because I audiobooked it, but Mistborn, that book was so good. I truly feel like it's one of the best fantasy books I've ever read, which most people are probably like, duh, Brandon Sanderson. But like, I was new to Brandon Sanderson this year, and I didn't realize how much I was gonna love this book. I feel like it's the magic system is what drew me in, even before the character, which is very, very rare for me. But you can use different metals to do different things, like super strength and stuff like that. Some people can only use one metal, and our main character, Vin, can use all of them. And it's basically, at least the first book, her journey of getting adopted into this sort of found family situation of people who want to take down their lord ruler And as far as fantasy goes, I feel like it's really accessible. There's some fantasy books that I feel like I still shy away from, even though I've read a lot of fantasy, because I just know I'm just gonna be so intense. But I've read Well of Ascension, and then there's one more book in Mistborn as like a trilogy, and then I understand that there's like the Cosmere, so just like all of his books, and I assume they intertwine in different ways. So I'm excited for 2025 to like continue into that universe. Next, in a row, I read Crave, Crush, and Covet, which are 3 books in the Crave series, which is high school YA vampire romance. One of my faves, a classic. This follows the story of a girl who is human who ends up in a boarding school with vampires, werewolves, etc. And I don't want to give like too much away about the series. It goes wild places, let me tell you. But it's very much giving Vampire Diaries. If you like that show, you would probably like the vibes of Crave. And at first when I started reading it, I was like, this is a combo of Vampire Diaries and Twilight that somebody mashed together because the genre was super popular. But as I headed further into it, it is its whole own thing. And it is at times quite unhinged. So if you're in for like a fun wild ride, like 100% I recommend going for that series. Ironically, after those 3, I reread Twilight. I don't know if it was that series that just like rebuilt the urge to read this, but I'd been wanting to reread Twilight for a while. I read it like almost 10 years ago, and I wanted to see if it held up because I remember when I read it at 18, I was like, I wish I'd read this at 14, and I still wish that. I feel like it would have hit so hard if 14-year-old Katelyn had her hands on this. But, you know, better late than never. And so I read it and I wanted to see if I still liked it, because sometimes when I go back and read the YA books that I loved in high school, I'm like, oh, like maybe not the best, but this one held up. If you don't know what Twilight is, where have you been? High school YA, romance, vampires, etc. It was a lovely reread as always. I feel like I was still super familiar with the story because I read Life and Death when it came out, which is the gender-bent Twilight, and then I also read Midnight Sun, which is Twilight from Edward's perspective that we had been promised for years and years and years by Stephanie Meyer. But it was really fun because I watched the Twilight movie all the time, and going back and reading it, I like to remember what fun Edward is like, because in the movies, Edward is just such a serious type of person, and Bella is such a serious type of person, and in this there's a lot more banter. It's really fun. Next, I reread Red Rising. I read that book, man, how long has it been? 6 years ago? So it had been long enough that I felt like I didn't fully remember the story. To me, it is ultimate Hunger Games. At least the first book. There's a society that is split up into colors. Our main character is a red, which is at the very bottom of the totem pole, and then the rulers are the golds. He has to go undercover as a gold after a lot of really, really traumatic stuff going down. A lot of these young gold, like elites, they get sent into an academy where they have to do a Hunger Games style game, but it lasts like a year. It had been a really long time since I went into sci-fi, so that was kind of nice to go back. Originally, when I went into Red Rising, my understanding was that it was still a trilogy. Now, it has 7 books, which is why I immediately followed up with Golden Sun. This book is, I don't want to say it's like so much better than Red Rising, because Red Rising itself is very, very good. This book, I've now read the first 4. This one is the best, in my opinion, so far at least. And that is what I've heard from most people as well. I made a review about it a while back, and there were a lot of people telling me that this is, like top tier for them. The characters in this series are so distinct. You know how sometimes you can read a book and then like a couple weeks later you can't really remember the main character's name and you don't remember the side characters very much? Real people, feels like real people in here. Excellent banter, a detailed universe. Like, I love this series so much. So then after reading Golden Sun, I immediately went into Morning Star, which is the 3rd book. And that technically can wrap up as a trilogy. I almost wanted to leave it with a bow and just be like, it was a trilogy for me. Because I know that the next several books, they're quite thick. But then I heard the synopsis that book 4 is like 10 years later, and we get to see people's kids and some people who are all grown up now and stuff like that, and I just really, really wanted to read that. But I sort of wanted to take a break for a little bit, so I switched gears and I went back to the Crave series. I read Court and Charm. I think they all start with C's. So it's hard to keep them straight sometimes. I feel like book 4 is when things really started to get out there as far as the Crave series goes. The world does expand a lot. I felt as though we just had to hold on and go for the ride because so much happened in that book. And then we go into Charm, and this is probably the first time I've ever seen this done. Questioning my statement there, but Charm truly felt like canon fan fiction to me. Like the author was like, we mentioned this way back a while ago, and I'm just gonna write a book about it, like side quest it. And it was so fun. Like it's probably, I think it's my second favorite in the series because I loved book 2 so much. There's just a lot of enemies to lovers banter in there, and that is my cup of tea for sure. But then we get a lot of that as well in book 5. It's a lot of fun. It's unhinged, truly. But I had like a lot of fun reading it. But when I came out of it, that was when I kind of needed, I feel like, a break from the series because I had been reading them so quickly that it was all getting really muddled together in my head. And so I'm gonna look at my notes. That was my last book in this series for the year because I just have the last one left. Then I read Attached at the Hip by Christine Riccio. I had so much fun with that book because I feel like I grew up watching Christine's booktube videos. She's probably like the main inspo for me having started this channel when I was like 19. I find that I have a very similar sense of humor, especially in dialogue and books like that. So if you haven't heard of Attached at the Hip, it is basically like a combo of The Bachelor and Survivor. There's this girl who's just kind of like, I would say wallflower-ish, kind of shy, and her twin sister is not that way. And they kind of have this conversation at the very beginning of the book where her twin sister is like, you don't do anything on your own. Like, you have not done anything independently. So the main character, Ori, signs up for the show on a whim and then ends up on there. And because it's called Attached at the Hip, you get tied to a partner in a Survivor situation. She ends up getting paired with her high school crush and then an extremely attractive parkour athlete. And it's a very fun time. I read it while I was at the beach, so that was just like perfect timing for me there. Then I read The 12-Week Year, which is a complete switch from my normal genre. I don't really do a lot of nonfiction, and I feel like I really don't do a lot of self-help, self-improvement stuff. I sometimes feel like it gets a little too annoying to me a lot of the time, but this one, I really love the idea behind the 12-week year, and I made several videos about it this year of me using the techniques in the book to start my book covers business, and I felt that it was very effective for me. I don't think I mentioned that I've made reviews for pretty much all the other books in this list, so I will link everything in the description plus the 12-week year videos if you're interested in that type of thing. Next up was another reread of Shatter Me. I love Shatter Me. That is like my go-to travel book because the paperback that I have is so worn out and I'm not afraid of hurting it. So whenever I'm traveling, I always take it, but I hadn't really done a complete reread in a very long time. So I went back and reread that one, and it was so fun. Like, I love the prose and style in it. If you don't know what Shatter Me is about, it is a young girl, she's like 17, and she has had this ability for her entire life where people touch her, they feel extreme pain to the point that if she touches someone for too long, they die. Until the son of their main governor person pulls her out and wants to use her as a weapon. If you like Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner, all of those things, you will probably like this book. I read 24 books this year because I forgot to put Iron Gold on my list. Here's the copy of Shatter Me in question. She's been through a lot. It's completely folded on the back. She vaguely smells like sunscreen. So, I really liked Iron Gold overall. I had mixed feelings because it was multiple POV, which is something that we haven't gotten. And it is also our main character from the trilogy more as a true grown-up. Like, he's like 20 in the original trilogy, and in this one he's more like in his mid-30s. He has a kid. So it was a very different perspective from him than what I'm used to. And then some of the side characters, I don't necessarily think we're meant to like some of them, which makes sense because I'm still very upset with at least one of them in here. But it does expand the world a lot, and so I still want to read the other 3 books. I don't think the 7th book is even out yet, so maybe I'll catch up. We'll see. These are kind of chunky novels as well, but also the covers for these are so good. I don't know if you can see on the back here. Dark Age, I think that is like the coolest cover with the snake. After that, I read Well of Ascension, which is the second Mistborn book. Like, I don't want to give anything away in this video, obviously, but oh my gosh, the ending of that book. The anxiety. I haven't gotten into the next book yet because I needed to recover. At the end of Mistborn, I didn't really know where we were going with the story in general, and Well of Ascension, it was so good. And I feel like a lot of series and a lot of trilogies really suffer in the second book, and this one did not. It really had nice pacing, which I think is the problem with most books. Like, why it has that kind of lull in book 2 is the pacing almost necessarily slows down, because if you're going to expand the world in book 2, like, you need to have a slower pace just a little bit. And I feel like Brandon Sanderson really, like, nailed that. And then also we got a couple new characters in the mix that were really interesting. I just feel like there's so many problems for us to fix in the next book that I almost feel bad for the characters. My next read was La Vie de Guinevere, which is a King Arthur retelling. I truly loved this one. I had some background info coming into it because I've been following the author for a really long time on TikTok, and she self-published this. It's a really interesting, like, background story for it. The idea is that we have Vera in our modern day time, and then Merlin shows up and is like, you're actually Queen Guinevere from the 600s. I've hidden you here in modern day, and now we need you to come back to help with some stuff. If you at all liked the show Merlin, you would like the book. I went into it thinking it was a standalone, though, and I got to the end, and I was like, I beg your pardon? I left a comment on one of the author's videos. She's like, books 2 and 3 are coming. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Next up, we have Skyshade, and that is the third book in the Lightlark series, which is now getting a book 4 at least, potentially more than that. It's very much Court of Thorns and Roses vibes with the courts, and then all of the rulers, to keep a curse from, like, descending upon all the lands, they have to go fight each other and somebody has to die. And that's, I don't want to give anything away about the third book, so that's kind of like where we start in book 1. I feel like it has all of the big tropes right now, like love triangle, enemies to lovers, and then, like, a lot of those lines that we see on Book Talk, like the touch her and you die situation, and that is my wife, all caps. I personally have had a hard time grasping onto the magic system of those books, but overall the world building I really enjoy, and I really like the characters. So at the end of Skyshade, I sort of felt the same way that I felt at the end of Nightbane, which is book 2, is that I was just a little bit confused about, like, how the magic is working in the world, but I'm hoping that those get ironed out as we move forward with the books. But I mean, you can't not read the series. There was a lot of drama about its original debut, so as someone who's incredibly nosy, I'm gonna be reading the whole series. Next, I read Powerless, and as far as genre and vibe goes, I probably shouldn't have read it directly after Skyshade, just because I feel like it is in that very similar new adult kind of a Hunger Games vibe. Though I did truly enjoy Powerless. Like, had me kicking my feet screaming, like, and I feel like a lot of people read it and they very much compared it to Red Queen, which, in my opinion, it is very similar to Red Queen. If you enjoyed Red Queen, you will probably enjoy Powerless. But for me, I still really loved it. And I am very eager to read the next book. That's probably going to be my next audiobook, is book 2. Next, I read Withered Rose, which I had never heard of. It got me with one of those, do you know the posts on TikTok where it'll just, like, show you a little clip of, like, the dialogue or just, like, a scene from the book that's highlighted? I saw one of those, and I saw it a couple times. I don't know if TikTok ads, I assume they do retargeting, because I also, this is why sometimes the online books really get me. Because I bought this book because I feel like I was retargeted with the ads, and I was like, this one line just really got me. And so I read Withered Rose. Mafia romance, but could probably fall under Christian fiction literature. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited. I plan to read the other ones. I am definitely a sucker for a mafia romance. I then read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So again, I usually don't read the self-help stuff, but I'm trying to read a little bit more of it because I am trying to, like, run a whole baby business by myself. And I feel like there's a lot of knowledge in books, even though sometimes I get annoyed by guru types. But I feel like the author of this book is really not like that. But I was very surprised by that book. I'm not going to make a whole review on this, I don't think, but it was very interesting to read that all of these habits of people who are highly effective are about how people manage relationships and working with other people. I'll be honest, like, I went into it very much hoping for probably information about how to be more productive. I just constantly feel like I don't have enough time to get everything that I want to get done finished, and I'm kind of at the point where, like, there's only 24 hours in a day, and you have to be asleep for some of them. you can only streamline your life and processes so much before you just reach a point where you can't do everything you need to do, which is definitely a point that I'm at right now. So I was hoping for a little bit more, I guess, saving grace from this book, but overall I feel like the lessons in it were very powerful and very interesting. So especially if you like work closely with teams, it is very businessy mindset, but also kind of about like how he approached his marriage and kids relationships and stuff like that, which was really interesting. But at this point, I feel like if I want to get more done, I'm just gonna have to figure out how to clone myself. And the last book on this list of 23 that became 24 is Fated Shot. This is another book that I think is on Kindle Unlimited. It's an indie published book that I follow the author on TikTok, so I was waiting for this release. It is a hockey romance. It's just like a good time, you know? Like sometimes you just need a quick romance read to really brighten your spirits. And the couple in this is just super cute. On my phone, it says I have 20% of the book left. If they have a last minute breakup, I will lose my mind. I just want them to be happy for the last 20% of the book. But as of recording this, we have 2 weeks left in the year. I don't know if I'll finish another book during that time. If I do, I'll maybe try and comment it or something. But for the most part, I am beta reading for a friend. So that is probably going to be the rest of my reading time for the year. And then I picked my top 5. So my top 5 books for the year was Gleanings, Mistborn, Golden Sun, The 12-Week Year, and La Vie de Guinevere. So I recommend all of the books that I read, but those are probably like my top 5 recommendations if you haven't read any of those. I would love to hear what your top 5 or top favorite book of the year was. I'm constantly looking for new books to add to the mile-long TBR, so we're getting very, very close to 2,000 subscribers, which is really exciting. So if you've been following along, thank you so much. And if you're not following yet, click the subscribe button. Why not? I wanted to do a fun little like 2K giveaway situation. As previously mentioned, this year I started a book covers business. For the giveaway, I wanted to give away 3 sets to 3 different viewers. So if you would like to enter to win, I will put on screen some examples of what the covers look like. And in the description, I'll put an entry link if you want to enter to win. And then once I reach the 2,000 mark, I'll draw 3 people and send those out. That is all I have for today. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn. Thanks for watching. Bye.